Week 28 of the Million Words Project hit in mid-January. I had just come off a 2-week hiatus in which I was making big plans for the new calendar year and deciding how I would tackle the second half of this year-long quest to write 1 million new words. And I had just experienced the lowest word count week of the entire experiment. During week 28, I tweeted the following. Starting the third week of a new year I had big plans for, and the big plans have dramatically changed. Having goals, benchmarks, and data are all great, but sometimes progress looks like standing still. Let's take a look at what I meant by that in this week's episode of the Million Words Project. Hello and welcome to week 28 of the Million Words Project. If you're new here, I'm Eric Sheridan Wyatt, an author, ghostwriter, editor, and writing and creativity instructor. 28 weeks ago, I challenged myself to write 1 million new words in 12 months. In this video series, I chronicle the ups and downs of this year-long experiment, and I invite you to come along as I learn more about myself, my writing, and the creative life in general. Hopefully you'll find something in these videos that will encourage or inspire you. There are now more than 20 of these videos available, so if you want to know more about this project, I invite you to scroll through and see if any of the topics interest you. For now, though, let's get started with this week's update. Week 27 had been the lowest word count week of the Million Words Project, and I started week 28 hopeful that the prior week had been an anomaly. Looking back at my journal, I got to Tuesday of week 28 with no new words other than my daily journal entries, and then Wednesday passed, and by Thursday, I only had 750 words. I wrote in my journal on Thursday, another week slipping by, way too preoccupied to do the writing and other work I had planned to do. And I'm starting to feel a quiet desperation about it, to be honest. Friday and Saturday, I chained myself to my computer and forced 9,000 words over 2 days, and I ended the entire week with just over 16,000 words. The distribution of the words is basically spread across 3 categories: my journal, fiction writing, and my ongoing life document project. One positive note that can be seen in the data here, since the end of the Fiction First initiative in week 23, I have continued to work on fiction over the following 5 weeks. I am preparing to work on writing a handful of new stories for a short story collection I actually started 7 years ago, and I've been collecting ideas for some other projects in the future. Looking at the charts page, I see that my current total across all 28 weeks is over 595,000 words, which is still more than 35,000 words ahead of pace, which is a big relief after back-to-back underperforming weeks. However, as I will discuss in a few moments, I knew at the end of this week that my regular routine was going to be disrupted for several weeks, maybe even the rest of the planned time frame for the Million Words Project. 35,000 words ahead was great, but it seemed a lot less reassuring than it did just a few weeks ago. As I mentioned last episode, my day-to-day reality got a bit of a reboot when I got some big exciting news, and a move planned for after the end of the Million Words Project was pushed forward. We had already decided to start looking for a new place to live, but then in week 28, the sewage line backed up in the rental house where we were living. That sewage line in the basement was just a few feet from where I typically filmed these update videos, and that not only reaffirmed our decision, but it shifted motivation toward the house hunting project. The intense motivation I initially had to have a strong writing week was shifted toward getting out of Sewage Central. Now, I'm being overly dramatic. The backup wasn't that terrible, but it was a major inconvenience and required me to spend several hours cleaning and disposing of some items that had been contaminated. And it did motivate us to spend extra time looking for houses. House hunting definitely became a major time drain. Week 28 was the second week in a row in which I devoted 15 to 20 hours to house hunting. And that's a lot. There are only so many hours in a week, and when I factored in other life responsibilities, it became hard to find hours to write. We actually ended up making offers on 2 houses that week after having visited 14 or so. We were outbid in both instances, and the search continued. All of this extra action was happening, and writing was not. Like I said in the update section of this video, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all passed with no additional words written other than my morning journal session. And I was beginning to panic. I had started the week determined to bounce back from the all-time low. And after finding time to write a meager 750 words on Thursday, I was standing face to face with the possibility of having an even worse week than the one I just finished. And I'll admit something to you. I was contemplating skipping the week and starting over the following Sunday and just pretending that the third week of January didn't happen. You see, because of the delay between when I actually lived week 28 and when I'm having the chance to film, edit, post a video about it, which is now, I could have easily skipped a week and no one out there would have known, right? I could have just called the next week, week 28, and moved on, except I would know. And that idea was counter to everything I'm actually trying to accomplish with the Million Words Project. The whole point of this video series is to learn from the ups and downs, not pretend that there aren't any setbacks. It's like I tell clients who are writing their life story to leave as a literary legacy. Your kids want to know how you dealt with failure more than how you celebrated success. Too often, we try to present a whitewashed version of our lives, which is actually counterproductive to sharing our lives at all. And that's exactly what I was considering doing. Thankfully, that temptation passed, and despite being embarrassed that I would have 2 subpar weeks in a row, I decided to press on and make a video no matter what. However, I also decided to take the last 2 days of my week and see if I can make up any of the ground I had lost. So let's just salvage a little bit of this week and go from there, I wrote in my journal. I was pretty sure I wouldn't hit the weekly target of 20,000 words, but I also knew that every word I did write would be progress toward the bigger goal. I might not make the full 1,000 miles, but I could take a few more steps. And at the end of the week, I had turned a disastrous week into a merely bad one. It wasn't the worst, and at least I had managed that much. But man, 16,000 words isn't a good week either. And that's when I realized something I've known in other contexts of life. Sometimes progress looks like standing still. Sometimes even falling backward is a sign of progress. In my case, I had to really fight through those last 2 days just to get a mediocre result, but making even that smallest gain was a big win. There is a Tanzanian proverb I adapted into one of my catchphrases for the Million Words Project when I say, remember the small steps lead to big results. The Tanzanian proverb version is this: little by little, a little becomes a lot. In some ways, this week was a win. In other ways, it was a failure. But no matter which way I look at it, I do know that I marched 16,000 steps along the million-step pathway. It wasn't as much as I had hoped to accomplish when the week started, but it was something. And something is always better than nothing. I shared a quote from Paulo Coelho last week, but a different statement of his is applicable to this week's episode. He said, "The secret to life is to fall 7 times and to get up 8 times." Now, it wasn't just the physical act of looking for houses on Zillow, coordinating showings with our realtor, going from house to house to assess the suitability of each one. I was also using a lot of creative energy to make these suitability assessments. I wrote in my journal, trying to imagine building this upcoming new life is taking almost all of my energy. Just trying to get it as right as possible, of course, but also trying to probe for possible unexpected negative aspects to this house or that house. We weren't just changing addresses, we were trying to find the spot where we would build and grow over the next 10 to 20 years. It was a lot of extra time and energy devoted in directions outside of this million words challenge. When Thursday rolled around, I could have just thrown in the towel on the whole week. One of the most prevalent points of resistance to anything that is good for us, whether it be diet, exercise, pursuing our creative dreams, starting a new good habit, whatever. It's the lure of abandoning the pursuit whenever things don't go exactly right. How many times have I vowed to exercise 3 times in a week, and when I get to Friday night and haven't done a lick, I just give up until next week? Or if I'm doing a 2-week abstinence of caffeine or sugar or whatever, and I mess up on day 1, so I throw in the towel and go buy a dozen donuts and 2 liters of iced coffee. Instead, this time I decided to get as much progress in as I could, despite knowing I would not meet the weekly target. So from a numbers standpoint, this week looked a lot like standing still, but in another sense, it was a major victory. This week's point to ponder is aimed at someone out there who has had a series of setbacks or failures. I don't know who you are. Chances are, even if I knew you, it wouldn't be obvious that you fit this description, and that's okay. But I believe this message is reaching someone who has a burning desire to complete some long-delayed project. You have something you've always wanted to do, but you haven't quite gotten around to it. The reasons you haven't done it are probably valid, or most of them are. You probably also throw in some shaky justifications along with the valid reasons, just to try to make yourself feel a little better about not doing that thing you really want to do. I know, because I've been there. But I want you to ask yourself the central question of any stuck project. Is there anything I could do right now, today, to take a few small steps toward that unrealized dream? I can almost guarantee that regardless of how small, if you can end this week just a little closer to realizing your dream, or even just a few steps closer to being able to start the project, you will feel better than if you just chalk up another week to a lost cause. Next week starts a 10-week roller coaster of ups and downs as my personal and private life takes a number of twists and turns. So much good stuff is happening, but almost none of it is conducive to writing for 20 to 25 hours a week. I hope you'll come along as I chronicle my march toward 1 million words. And let's just say, I was once confident that I would hit the 1 million word mark 2, maybe even 3 weeks early. And now, well, I'm not completely confident that I'll hit 1 million words in a year. And that's a big change in perspective. So join me next time and find out how all this plays out. Until then, I want to remind you that your words matter. Make them count.